Hi folks, and welcome to the 5th video in my Getting Started series for the game B-17 Flying Fortress the Mighty 8th. Now in this video I'm going to run through training mission number 2, Approach and Landing, that's available in the game. Now I'm going to actually do this twice. The first time will just be a simple exterior view approach and landing, which is the easiest method. And the second example I will give will be landing the B-17 from the interior view using the pilot's action view, which is looking out of the pilot's window. Now I was planning on doing a third example, which would have been running through a more complex approach and landing checklist, such as that used by the real B-17 pilots. But what I found is that for some reason, when I actually do utilize that checklist and I set the engines up, etc., in the way that the real pilots did, that during the approach and landing, suddenly an engine will stop working and it all goes haywire. So I've decided to not give that as an example because it's obviously not workable in the game. And I'm actually rapidly reaching the conclusion that the damage modeling that's been implemented in this game is still too full of bugs to actually be useful and enjoyable to play. So I'm just going to give the two examples. I'll talk a little bit more about my reservations surrounding the engine management modeling, in particular the damage modeling of the engines, in my later engine management video. Anyway, let's move on to the training mission now. So we'll click on the new game panel here on the top left and the continue switch in the lower right. Then we'll left click on the choose a training mission. We'll click on the continue switch in the lower right. And then we'll choose training mission number 2, approach and landing. And this says this training mission sees you seated behind the controls of a B-17 as it turns onto final approach. You will need to follow the correct approach and ease the bomber onto the runway. Once you've landed, you should come to a complete halt to end the mission. So without further ado, let's go ahead and I'll give you the first approach and landing example. So before I get going on this mission, I've actually just pressed the pause key on my keyboard to pause the mission at this point. And the reason for doing that is because the first few steps that you need to do them all very quickly, and I don't want to kind of rush through them at the very beginning and have you kind of like going, what's he talking about? It's all too quick. So what we're going to do here is I'm just going to step through them slowly, and then we'll just go back and then I'll do this mission from the beginning real time, and you'll be able to then just see me doing those steps in quick succession. So the first step you would normally need to do here would be to press the F2 key to take the exterior view of the B-17, and then you can rotate the camera around by holding down your left mouse button and moving the mouse around. And what you'll see over here in the distance is the airfield that you're going to land at, and the runway is there. So you can see that you need to start your turn fairly soon. So anyway, that's just so you need to run through these first steps fairly quickly so that you're ready for that turn on this final approach. So what you would normally need to do once you've gone to the F2 and you've gone to this exterior view, you've rotated the camera view around, you would then need to preset your throttle, assuming you're using a joystick throttle control, to something around 45%. And the reason for that is that when you go into manual mode, you don't want the engine speed to drastically change from what the AI currently has. Obviously, if you have your throttle set to full or to 0, then you're going to have issues, because as soon as you go into manual mode, the B-17 will either suddenly start dropping drastically in altitude, or it will suddenly start running away from you, and you're going to have to do a very tight turn to come back for this runway. So set your throttle to about 45% once you've moved your camera around here. The other thing to do, once you've pressed the M key after that and you're in manual mode, you then want to just lower your landing gear. That's fine at this stage, you get it done pretty early, then you can focus on the rest of the approach and landing. We won't do the flaps at this stage. The flaps will be once we're actually aligned with the runway and we're on our straight approach at that point. So let's now just go back and I'll do all of that in real time, and then I'll describe the other steps that I'm doing as we proceed. Okay, here we go. So F2 external view, I'm going to rotate the camera around so you can see the airfield. I'm going to hit M for the M key, and my joystick is, my throttles were set just below 50%. And you want to make sure that your speed doesn't really drop off at this point. I'm going to actually lower the landing gear by Shift and up arrow on the keyboard, and at the same time I've also started my turn towards the runway. I'm actually going to use a hat control on my joystick to move the camera around a bit, which helps an enormous amount to have. And all the time I'm allowing the altitude to slowly decline. You can see my speed is actually about 150, which is a bit high, so I'm actually going to throttle back a bit. And now I'm on my final approach. I'm going to deploy my flaps. A few more adjustments on the direction of my approach here. And that speed is continuing to decline, which is actually fine. You actually want to land probably somewhere about 80 to 90 miles per hour as your wheels actually hit the runway. So this looks actually like a very good approach. My throttle's probably about, I guess, probably about 35%. And there, now throttles fall back. I'm going to retract my flaps. And I'm just actually going to, normally you'd obviously keep accelerating to the end of the runway. But in this mission, all you need to do is actually just stop your B-17 to end the mission. So I've actually just pulled my throttle control back to 0. And I'm just going to let the B-17 freewheel to a stop. Now, one thing I would say is that in this training mission, it automatically sets the tail wheel lock on, and that so you don't actually need to include that in your checklist for this mission. But when you're flying the real missions, you do need to have your tail wheel in the locked position once you've lowered your landing gear. And obviously, once you've landed and you've retracted your flaps, you would want to unlock your tail wheel. So you lock your tail wheel by pressing the T key on your keyboard when you've just lowered your landing gear in the air, and you'd press Shift T on the ground here now, and I'll just do that, Shift T to release the tail wheel, and then you'll be able to use that being unlocked and then you'll be able to actually taxi and have the B-17 move around freely. So that's perfect. So actually just going to press the P key now to put the parking brakes on, just so we can quickly end the mission there. So we'll just check the mission debriefing. And it says, congratulations, you have demonstrated an adequate command of landing skills and successfully completed this training mission. Excellent. So we're now actually going to move on and do a slightly more complicated one. So let's move on to that right now. Okay, so in this example, I'm going to do landing from the cockpit view. And so first of all, my throttle control is just below 50%. Hit M to go into manual mode and pull back on my joystick to correct the descent. I'm going to lower the landing gear by a Shift and up arrow. Then I'm just going to look to see where the heck we are. Where is the field? Okay, it's over there. And so we're going to need to do a sharp right-hand bank. Now I find these landings through the cockpit extremely difficult to do. Part of that is down to this dome that's in front of the pilot's view, and that should actually be translucent, but it's completely opaque in the game, so you can't see where the heck the runway is. So now we're lined up roughly for the runway. I'm going to deploy the flaps by pressing the F key. And we've overshot the runway a bit, so I'm going to bank to the right a bit. And I've throttled back already as well a bit, as well as deploying the flaps, so our speed is kind of coming down pretty quickly. So as we approach the runway, I need to just pull back slightly on the joystick to try and do a 3-point landing. And there we go. That's us down. Throttle back. Wiggling the rudder left. I'm wiggling the rudder left and right there, desperately trying to stay on the runway. Let's go to the exterior view and just see how we did. Okay. It was far from perfect. So what we would do here is to retract our flaps by pressing, go back to manual mode again, by M, and then retract the flaps by pressing the Shift F on the keyboard. So pressing the wrong buttons there. So flaps are retracting. So a rather ugly landing, but yeah, we succeeded at least. I'll just hit the parking brake to end the training mission there. So, did we succeed? Yes, it was certainly adequate skills. It certainly wasn't particularly good skills, that's for sure. And then I'm going to need to do a bit of a left bank at the last moment here. I'm overshooting the beginning of the runway, but that's fine. I told you I wasn't very good at landing like this. There we go. So just pull back on the joystick slightly, throttle back a bit more. And we should come down into a nice 3-point landing. There was a bit of a bump. Oh, we bounced off the... we bounced a bit there. But let's just switch to the exterior view, see where we are. Well, heck, okay, that's good enough, I think. AI control for the engine management back. And yeah, there's the glitch. I've just lost an engine. So yeah, looks like I crashed into the ground. Oh, I should have keep an eye on the altitude, eh? Wow, I have never bent the wing up like that, and I've never seen the B-17 trundling along the ground on one wheel like that. Wow.